Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Pick Six podcast. Katie Mox here, flying solo today. Will Brinson is on vacation. But of course, welcome back to our All 32 series, the series where we catch you up with insiders from every team and give you the need to know information heading into the season. Today, we're diving into the Denver Broncos with Broncos beat reporter for the Denver Post, Parker Gabriel. Parker, happy training camp. The
Yeah,
rookies
happy
have
training.
reported. How are we feeling?
Yeah. Denver Broncos rookies report on Wednesday here this week, and then veterans next week. It is pretty wild to say, but football season is almost here.
Football season is almost here, and y'all have your joint practices with the Rams, which should be super interesting. Any matchups that you're looking forward to in those practices?
Well, there's a whole bunch. I think Aaron Donald against
Yes.
literally
Yes.
anybody, especially after the way the practice went last year. But especially, I think, given the work the Broncos have done on the offensive line, Ben
Yeah.
Powers coming over, obviously as a free agent from Baltimore. That's a good on good matchup, obviously. And then across the board, I think it's gonna be interesting to see. Obviously, Vance Joseph, Denver's new defensive coordinator, very familiar with the Rams, spent the last 4 years in the same division with Arizona. So there all kinds of stuff going on. That'll be the last week. It's sort of a unique setup. It's the
Yeah.
last week of the preseason. So late August, those two teams get together for 2 days here in Denver, and then obviously a preseason game on the weekend.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to see that Aaron Donald versus everybody
Yeah.
situation. But let's get right into it. We are going to talk about the O line in a little bit. But, last season, there were so many expectations for the Broncos, so much hype around Russell Wilson and how competitive this team would be in the AFC. That didn't happen. Nathaniel Hackett is gone. The legendary Sean Payton is in. What is the biggest difference that you have seen with this team and also just as an organization with Payton running the show?
Yeah, I think at this point, without a lot of hard data to go on so far, I think it's really just about the sense you get in terms of Sean Payton's confidence and experience. I mean, he's won 152 regular season games. He's got a Super Bowl ring, and it's not a knock on Nathaniel Hackett. Obviously, that didn't work, but before Sean Payton, Denver's last three coaches were first-year coaches, with Vance Joseph, Vic Fangio, and then Nathaniel Hackett, and none of them worked. And it's sort of,
Yeah.
Sean Payton showed up, and one of the things that you thought right away is, oh yeah, this guy, not only has he won a lot of games, but he just knows exactly what he wants to do. He knows how
Yeah.
he wants to build a culture. He knows how he wants to structure practice. All of the little minutia that goes into being a head coach, he's got 15 years of experience of, and that's not something that Denver's had at the top of its organization in a long time. So I think right off the bat, that's kind of the thing I think you notice first and foremost in talking to the players through the offseason program. Uh, that nobody wants to bash former coaches, right? But I think you get the clear sense that the guys that have been around a long time feel that too, that they've got a coach that sort of knows exactly what he wants.
Right. I mean, I think there was so much reported about Russell Wilson's relationship with Nathaniel Hackett. And I do know that one of Russell Wilson's favorite quarterbacks was always Drew Brees. Of course, Sean Payton was his coach for a long time. Does the relationship between Russell Wilson and Sean Payton seem really solid?
It does so far. And, Russell Wilson spoke very highly of Sean Payton before he ever got clearance to interview for the job. After the last game of the season, which was actually a win against the Chargers, he got asked a really general question about what he expected from the coaching search. And he, unprompted, he brought up more than one guy, including Denver's former defensive coordinator, Ejiro Evero. But he brought up Sean Payton. He brought up Jim Harbaugh. And he spoke really, really highly of Sean Payton, called him a wizard, sort of marveled at his intelligence and the time they'd spent together, not playing against each other, but also, at the Pro Bowl and things like that. So he's excited. They're obviously, I mean, Russell Wilson and Drew Brees are both shorter quarterbacks, two of
Yes.
the shortest that have made long NFL careers, but they're really different players. Even Russell at the height of his powers is a much different quarterback than Drew Brees. So the challenge for Sean Payton, obviously, is to take all the stuff that led to such a strong relationship between him and Drew Brees and then figure out how that fits with Russell Wilson's game compared to, what they had for so long in New Orleans.
All right. Well, let's talk about Russell Wilson's game because, in his career with the Seahawks, his stats were consistently solid. He had at least 20 touchdown passes per year. He completed 61% of those passes every single season. And then the graphic was just on there. Last year, career low, only 16 touchdown passes, 11 interceptions, QBR of just 36.7%. How are the vibes going into this season with Russell Wilson, and what is a realistic expectation of what he can do with this team under Sean Payton?
Yeah, if you've spent any time around Russell Wilson or read what he says in interviews, watched on YouTube or wherever, he's just relentlessly positive, and so the vibe has been that so far. And
Good.
I think the people in the Broncos front office and on the coaching staff are sort of cautiously optimistic. There's a lot of reasons why Russell Wilson, played as bad as he did last year, and a lot of them are on him.
Yeah.
That at the bottom line, you've got to produce in the NFL. There's obviously extenuating circumstances too. For whatever reason, they just could not get untracked offensively between he and Nathaniel Hackett. Hackett had a lot on his plate, given that he hadn't ever been a head coach before, and he hadn't
Right.
called plays since 2018. And then he was trying to do both of those things simultaneously for the first time in a while. Just none of it worked. And then on top of that, they were ravaged by injuries. So that's not to sound like a litany of excuses for Russell Wilson. He'd be the first to say that he didn't play his best. He said that a lot of times. And so I think it's going to be a mixture of sort of reversing all of those trends. Can he,
Yeah.
really sort of buckle down and take in this offense and process it and be able to play within it? Can Sean Payton better tailor a package of of playbook for him? Can they stay healthier at wide receiver and on the offensive line? And are they going to be committed to running the football, which is what Nathaniel Hackett said was going to happen last year, and it never really materialized consistently. So all of those things will play a role. And I think around here, in general, people think that he'll play better. And then
Yeah.
it's just a matter of how aggressive you want to be in that projection.
Yeah, look, I'm a huge 49ers fan. I have had Russell Wilson beat up on me for years. So I would lean towards last year was more of an outlier, and hopefully he will get back to the player that we've seen throughout his career with the Seahawks. We talked about the O-line in the beginning. Y'all beefed that up. You got Mike McGlinchey from the Niners, paid him a pretty penny.
Yeah.
And then you also picked up Ben Powers from the Ravens. Powers started all 17 games in Baltimore last season without committing any penalties, which you're definitely going to need with McGlinchey on the field. I will tell you, as a Niners fan, that guy will get you some false starts. For this offense to really rejuvenate, the ground game is going to be paramount. How has bolstering this O-line, not only to protect Wilson, but really get that ground game going?
Yeah, well, you're exactly right, Katie. I mean, both Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers rate out as being among the better run blockers out there, and that's something that Denver they weren't bad running the football last year, but they had this swoon after Javonte Williams got
Yeah.
hurt in early October, where before they got Latavius Murray basically off the street, from New Orleans, who turned into a productive player in the second half of the year, but they just never really had that hang your hat on it, be able to run the football, even when the other team knows you're going to, in those sort of situations. And so that to me, like, that's job number one for Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey, is to help Denver run the football. Sean Payton is going to want to. I mean, sometimes we think about the Drew Brees heyday and throwing the football all over and all the passing records and all of that, but at his core, Sean's a West Coast rooted guy, and that's what they're going to be about. McGlinchey and Ben Powers, that's what they were brought in for. That's what Samaje Perine was brought in for. That's what Chris Manhertz, the tight end from Jacksonville, was brought in for. All of this is geared toward them being, playing probably more under center, more with two tight ends, running the football consistently. And it's kind of interesting because all of that stuff is what Russell Wilson was best at by and large. The
Yeah.
best teams he had in Seattle, that's what they
Yeah.
did really well. That's what we thought Denver was going to try to do last year. It never
Yeah.
really materialized. So now it's round 2 this fall.
Yeah, certainly taking a lot of pressure off of Russell Wilson. This two-headed monster of Javonte Williams and Perine, it's pretty scary for opposing teams. Williams is optimistic that he will be cleared in time for training camp, assuming that they're going to want to ease Williams back into the lineup. It's going to put more work and carries on Perine, specifically on third down. Any concerns about this running back room heading into the season?
Sean Payton's expressed a lot of confidence about Samaje Perine being capable of being an every down back. He hasn't been that in his career, of course. So it'll be interesting to see if that's sort of the role he ends up in early in the season as they get Javonte Williams back up to speed. They've got a couple of other guys that they like. Tyler Beatty is a young guy that they picked up during the season last year, formerly of Mizzou. Tony Jones Jr. played for Sean Payton in New Orleans and is a free agent signing this spring. And then they've got an undrafted free agent that they got this spring out of college, Jaleel McLaughlin from Youngstown State, who was prolific in college. That's not exactly like household names, right? After Javonte Williams and
Yeah.
Samaje Perine. So I think you wonder a little bit about the depth, but they started the offseason acting as though they didn't think Javonte Williams was going to be ready for the season. But the last couple of months, they've really changed the approach they've taken and how many backs they've had on the roster, who they've kept, who they've cut. And so that it really seems as though they think that Javonte Williams is going to be involved at least to some degree early in the season.
All right, looking at this wide receiver room, you guys did draft rookie Marvin Mims this year in the second round. And with KJ Hamler and Tim Patrick both recovering from surgeries, Mims is going to get some early reps in training camp. And, he could make some noise here. What are your expectations for this rookie? Can he actually take a spot in this receiver room?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think when you were, in the lead up to the draft, I don't think anybody would have pegged wide receiver necessarily as a need or maybe where Denver would go with its first pick at the end of the second round. They even traded up then to take him right at the end of the second round. And it's interesting because not only did they do that, but they didn't trade either of the guys who were sort of in trade rumors the entire offseason in Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. And so now you've got a situation where you've got Jeudy, Sutton, Tim Patrick, as you mentioned, and Marvin Mims. And then you've got KJ Hamler working back from a pectoral injury. He was involved at least to some degree in the offseason program. So you've got a really crowded wide receiver
Yeah.
room. They added a couple of guys that have played for Sean Payton before on top
Yeah.
of that group. So it'll be one of the sort of hottest contested position battles on Denver's roster. And I think
Mm.
you're right in the sense that Mims and Hamler have sort of similar skill sets. They may play Tim Patrick in the slot as sort of like a big slot, and there's only so many roster spots to go around. Obviously, if you draft a guy in the second round, he's going to make the team. So, there's a lot of competition in that group, and the 6 or so that they end up taking are going to be super interesting.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here. We get back. We're going to talk Denver defense. Always been solid, but are they a little light in one area? You're watching Pick Six. We'll be right back. All right, back on Pick Six with Parker Gabriel here. Parker, we know that Sean Payton has made a lot of changes on the offense. Denver should definitely be able to move the ball better down the field. Now, if we look at the defense, they've always been solid in this area. Y'all have talent at pretty much all three levels of defense, but there are depth concerns up front. Does this concern you at all? What would you say is the biggest weakness, of the Denver defense heading into the season?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's question marks up front for sure. They swapped Draymond Jones, who was a free agent, ended up signing with Seattle, for Zach Allen, who arrived as a free agent from Arizona, played for Vance Joseph the last 4 years in Arizona. So you've got some continuity there. And then DJ Jones, who Katie, from San Francisco, solid
Yes.
player in the middle of an interior defensive lineman, a really good player, probably an underappreciated one. And then from there, that's kind of where the question marks are. They got a really nice season last year from Deshaun Williams, who is sort of a journeyman. He's in Carolina now. So they're going to count a lot on Mike Purcell, who's a veteran. And then a couple of guys who they drafted on day 3 last year who are going into their second years as pros. Matt Henningsen was a 6th rounder out of Wisconsin, and Ioma Uwazurike, say that 5 times fast.
Try saying it once.
Yeah, right. 4th rounder from Iowa State. Both guys were sort of like fringe rotation players as rookies. Showed some promise, but they're going to have to really sort of, up the pass rush a little bit to be in that sort of 25 to 30 snaps a game. And that's really, they signed Tyler Lancaster, who missed all of last year after playing in Green Bay early in his career. So again, there's not a lot of household names beyond Zach Allen and DJ Jones as sort of the anchors of that room. They signed Frank Clark. They're calling him an outside linebacker. I think you'll see Vance Joseph mix up fronts a lot, play in a lot of different ways. But yeah, if there's an area on defense where you don't really know what the rotation is going to look like, it's probably after those two guys up front.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, this is a gambling show. So we got to ask you some questions about the season here. The Broncos, again, last year, super high expectations. This year, maybe a little bit more realistic to win the AFC West. They're at plus 475. Chiefs, of course, the favorite. It's going to be hard to compete. And then you got the Chargers, which I think is probably, in line with what the Broncos can do this year. Then the Raiders have so many question marks. Any chance that you would lay the plus 475 on the Broncos this year to win the AFC West?
Yeah, well, there's a reason that's where the Denver is, and that's where Kansas City is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's Kansas City's division until somebody says otherwise. Could Denver finish second? Could see the games with the Chargers over the course of the season having real ramifications on a wild card? Yeah. Am I? I'm not a betting man as it is, as they say. But if I were, I'd find other things to do with my money than pick the Denver Broncos to win the AFC West in 2020.
All right, let's find other things to do with your money. Looking at this win total, it's at 8.5 with the over juiced to minus 115. Broncos getting 9 wins this season. When you look at their schedule, can they do it?
I think it's going to be tough, honestly. I think there's a reason why that's where it's said. That's right about. I think I don't know that I've put out like a real game by game prediction at this point. My gut says 8 and 9, so right in the range. I'm tempted on the under, and
Yeah.
a lot of it is most of their starting positions look fine. Kareem Jackson said a couple weeks ago, the veteran safety said, on paper we look pretty good, and I think that's true. They've had injury issues over the past several years, and
Yes.
maybe they're due for that luck to turn around. But if it doesn't, I'm not entirely convinced on the roster depth that it takes to push into that 9 or 10 win area. And ultimately, I wonder if that won't be the decision maker.
All right, so let's look at Russell Wilson. They added a bunch of pass catchers for him. They beefed up the O line there. When you look at his yards, passing yards, it's what, 3,000? I can't, it's too small. 3,000.
725 and a half.
3,725 and a half. Now he has gone over 4,000 yards. That was in 2019 and actually 2015 as well. Last year, 3,524. Do you see this as an over for him this year, given what they've been able to provide him in the offseason?
Yeah, I actually like the under because for two reasons. I think they really are going to commit to running the football. I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the top 8 or so in the NFL in run rate. And then the other thing I think you have to consider is that Russell Wilson's been an Iron Man for his entire career. He hadn't missed a start until that pinky injury his last year in Seattle. But he was on the injury report 3 different times last year: a hamstring, his throwing shoulder, and a concussion late in the season. So that's just, I think it's part of the conversation with Russell Wilson that really wasn't part of the conversation over most of his first decade in the NFL. He's not old by quarterback standards. He's going to be 35 in October, but he's got a lot of tread on the tires. And you saw the sort of, a little bit of a dent in the armor on the health front, really for the first time in his career last year. So those would be 2 things that give me pause on the over there.
Okay, he's got that 24 and a half passing touchdowns. Over or under for that one?
This one I like. He's averaged 31 for his career. I like the over here. I think they'll get back to being more efficient in the passing game. I just don't know that they're going to be prolific in the passing game.
Yeah.
But you get down around the goal line, and Sean Payton will have some things dialed up to try to get cleaner looks than they had in the red zone last year.
All right, and looking at this run game, we talked about this. Samaje Perine is his over under for yards is 600 and a half. He will start out the season as RB1. We'll see how that happens throughout the season. 600 to me seems kind of low for him. What are you taking on this?
Yeah, this would be, if he hits the under, this would actually perhaps be good news for Denver, because it would mean that Javonte Williams is able to handle a bigger workload. I'll take the over. That injury that Javonte Williams had, ACL plus the LCL and other damage, is a serious one. I know they keep saying that they're confident about where he's at. I just will be surprised if it's an entirely smooth road back to just playing, 50 snaps a game or something like that. So, yeah, I think Samaje Perine in for a big workload early in the season.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take that over. Last thing, we didn't talk about him too much, but Jerry Jeudy, obviously a big receiver for you guys. I know they've added some more pass catchers, may cut into some of his catches, but the over under on his yards, 925.5. How do you feel about Jeudy?
Yeah, he finished just short of 1,000 last year with a really strong closing stretch. They're going to be pretty balanced. I think Greg Dulcich has a chance to be a sort of breakout type guy, second year tight end. They've got a bunch of receivers in, obviously, as you say, sort of in contention for catches. And then Jeudy himself has had injury issues in the past. He had an ankle injury that cost him 7 games, I think, in his second season. I will take the under very slightly here.
Take the under very slight. Okay, last question. Coach of the year, Sean Payton has the second shortest odds, just because Arthur Smith and Dan Campbell are tied at the top at plus 1,000. He's at plus 1,200. If he could turn this team around and be a big competitor in the AFC, how do you feel about Sean Payton as coach of the year?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think he's got a great chance to get strong consideration. If Denver makes the playoffs, obviously, given where they've been 7 straight years without being in the postseason, 6 straight losing seasons, he'd probably be right up there. I just think this is probably a bigger project than that. And if they finish 8 and 9, they could have a productive year without having what you might call like a successful one. But I don't think that would get him coach of the year. So I understand why he's got the odds that he does. I will call it a modest surprise if they have a really good season that sort of puts him at that level.
Okay, well, the vibes are high again for Denver. We hope it is a better season. Thank you so much to Parker Gabriel. You can catch his articles on the Denver Post. Stay tuned for more from our All 32 series with daily drops in your podcast feed and on YouTube. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube page. For everyone listening to audio only, make sure you download, follow, leave a 5-star review, and tell your friends to listen and watch the pod. Parker, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much. And good luck this season.
Thanks for having me.